I don't plan, Eddie, on ruining anything today because it is a beautiful day. It is sunny, and we have not one but two big-time wins to talk about for teams of local interest. And I'm going and checking out college basketball tonight. What is there to not love, right?
What are you checking out tonight?
That'd be Ball State and Buffalo.
Chirp, chirp.
That's right. I think I told you that at the beginning of the college basketball season, I said, you know what? We need to support all the local teams. So I bought tickets for Indiana State. I bought tickets for Ball State. I bought tickets for IU Indy. All the local D1 schools, I should say.
Okay. So you're just going to conveniently leave out the University of Indianapolis?
Got no problem with UIndy. Got no problem with Taylor.
It
Got no problem with Franklin. Got no problem with Earlham. Got no problem with Wabash. Got no problem with DePaul. Got no problem with Butler. None of it, right?
We
Butler's
know that
D1, but
we know that you don't have any problems with Taylor because of the basketball camp you used to do when you were a kid.
Yeah, 1983 first team all basketball camp. I think only 150 of us were awarded that. But good afternoon to you on a Wednesday, hump day. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice that you hear on this program. Eddie, we have been keeping a very close eye on our wager. Not wager, I guess, more kind of prediction. I think both of us are fascinated by this. But when will it be that the small chain of the Alps of snow from the parking lot there will be no trace whatsoever? Significant improvement yesterday on your behalf of this, because I said February 17th would be the last day that we would see any remnant. You took the under. You are feeling where right now in your wager?
I think I'm going to need a miracle, Jake. I think I'm going to need some rain. Yes. I think I'm going to need some rain to help me out.
I don't know, man. It looks significantly smaller today than it did a couple of days ago.
Well, that's for sure. It helps that it was almost 60 yesterday. I don't know if we hit 60 or not, but
point being that just when you start to think you're making headway, then all of a sudden you get a temporary stall. That kind of happened when it comes to the Pacers in terms of and at this point, I hate saying it, but at this point, I think everybody's resigned to the fact that you want them to be competitive and entertaining, but at the same time, you're not totally disappointed in games that they drop because of the critical nature of that top 4 pick. And that's going to be a theme between now and May when they do the lottery ping pong balls and announce who the top 4 picks are going to be, assuming Indiana stays within that realm. They are now within a game of falling out of that bottom 4. I think it's bottom 6 that have the equal percentage, right?
No, the bottom 3 have the same percentage.
Of landing number 1.
Correct.
I'm talking about of staying in that 4.
Oh, I'd have to fully look into that.
I believe the bottom 6 have equal percentage of ending up as one of the 4 picks.
I think if you have the worst record, you can't fall beyond 5.
I think that's right. And, of course, if Indiana falls to 5, the pick goes to the Clippers as part of the protected nature of that trade. But let's begin with what's that?
It is worth noting, even with the win last night in New York against the Knicks, they still have a quote-unquote game advantage over the Washington Wizards, who are 3rd in terms of the inverse standings.
So they are, in other words, they are still 1 game behind Washington in terms of the standings, which would be 1 game up on the chase for the suck, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And a game and a half on New Orleans, and then 2 games ahead of tonight's opponent.
Well, and again, to not confuse people, let's speak it in terms of you want to be behind teams, and they are behind those teams, correct? In terms of the actual standings.
Yeah.
So here's what I thought about last night. As I was sitting there and having a brain dropping late in the middle of the night, I knew I had a meeting this morning, so I didn't sleep well. Thank you, Eddie. And I got to thinking about what happens when, and all of us have been through this. We've all been through it. You have a relationship, whether it be a place where you worked, and it just didn't work out, and a company decided to move on from you, or more realistically and more common of association for people would be you're dating someone, you have a significant other, and the two of you break up. And, at the time, the breakup was really hard, but you both moved on now. It doesn't mean still 2 years after the fact, 4 years after the fact, whatever it may be, when you run into serendipitously that person, you're at Target and you run into your ex. And what do people say? Oh my gosh, you're not going to believe this. I ran in to Jane and I just got back from the gym. I look terrible. Like, I've kind of gained a little weight. Or you say to yourself, I ran into Jane and I got to tell you, she doesn't look like she used to. Be it fair or not, the reality is that people are always kind of gauging. They want to have the upper hand of the two of like, well, I'm doing okay here, right? And you want the message to be sent that even though there was that break, like, I'm still here. Look at me. I'm still taking care of myself. Still look good. I've improved upon the things you wanted me to improve upon, whatever it may be. And I feel like, Eddie, when it comes to the Pacers, if you look realistically at the Pacers and the way that their year has gone, we know, obviously, that the Pacers' season has been absolutely derailed by injury. You could say injuries. It all began when Tyrese Halliburton went down. And going into the season, you sat there and looked at it and said, as I did, look, I think they could still win, 42 games. Hammer the over on this. Because at the time, you're like, Tyrese Halliburton, okay, he's out, but you still have Siakam, you still have Toppin, you still have Neesmith, you still have Nembhard, you still, all the pieces, right? Mathurin. And then very early on, Neesmith gets hurt, Toppin is hurt, McConnell, they're resting a little bit from time to time. And so that changes kind of the trajectory of where they're going. And you knew then that, okay, this is a franchise that is using this year for all of the different things we've talked about beyond just, trying to win games, if you will. And yet, look at their last couple of weeks, last 3 weeks. Look at their wins. 2 of their last 4 wins are against the last 2 opponents that they faced in series last season.
Both those teams have the best records on their home floor in the NBA, too.
I think what you are seeing here, and we'll get more into this over the course of the show, but I think what you're seeing is Indiana making it for themselves and the rest of the league, putting forth a concerted effort to say, yes, we have been devastated by injury this year. Yes, our goals and our mission and our objectives and our vision for this year might be different than what we thought it was going to be, going into Game 7 in Oklahoma City. But while we have struggled, while we are trying to stay in the lottery now, while we have had to retool our roster and go deep into almost G League or two-way players from time to time, it is very important that we, the Indiana Pacers, let the rest of the league know, and more importantly, let the teams that we were neck and neck and or slightly ahead of last year, it's important that they know and that we and ourselves see and believe and let our players know we're still here. It's like the mockumentary that was done by Joaquin Phoenix. The title of it was I'm Still Here. And Joaquin Phoenix's mockumentary, if you remember when Joaquin Phoenix 15 or so years ago went on Letterman and acted like completely bizarre and out of his mind, and everybody's like, what in the world is going on with Joaquin Phoenix? And he's leaving his acting career to become a rapper. What in the world? And then you find out that it was all part of a mockumentary, meaning a documentary based on fiction, of Joaquin Phoenix trying to do prove the point of when you are celebrity, you can act as out of bounds and as out of left field as you want and still be coddled. And that was the whole intention and point of it. And the reason they called it I'm Still Here is because in the documentary, it was to show, look, the brilliance of Joaquin Phoenix is still there, even though he's doing this, proving a point. And for the Pacers, it's a little bit of I'm still here, because even though they are masquerading through and acting a little bit wacky for the vast majority of their year, when there are times where it's needed, they need to let you know the brilliance is still there. They can still compete with a New York. They can still compete with an Oklahoma City. Now, the other side of that would be Purdue. And we saw last night, similar to Indiana. Indiana had a game last night talking about the Pacers where they're in New York, in the Garden, and they're leading the Knicks through the majority of the game. Then they kind of backpedal and slide their way into an overtime. And in the overtime, Quentin Jackson, for example, makes plays for them where they're able to get that victory. Purdue last night, going into Nebraska, tough environment. Crazy to say about Nebraska, I realize. Veteran team, one with very good shooters, and Purdue comes out and sets the tone and gets the first punch early. And then, as you saw other people point out yesterday on social media, and it was, the freezing cold takes, an epic slide for Purdue to allow Nebraska. Now, is it really a slide, or is it, hey, credit Nebraska in their veteran play, and then credit Purdue in their veteran play down the stretch, whether it be C.J. Cox hitting big shots, whether it be their defense down the stretch, whether it be Braden Smith finding the right spots. Purdue made the plays necessary to win that game in overtime. But that's not to say it was an easy day. But what could Purdue learn from it? Let's find out more about that and more on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Java House, by the way, with a multitude of brick-and-mortar cafes, including 3 of them in the West Lafayette area, also right in Carmel, in Midtown Carmel. Clay Terrace, Broad Ripple, and 2 downtown. But joining us now, Brian Neubert from Gold and Black to talk about what happened last night for Purdue basketball in Lincoln. Brian, that was kind of a tale of like 3 halves last night, if you will, right? I mean, you had Purdue great from the outset, then Nebraska comes roaring back, and then Purdue winning in the overtime. Let's begin with the Nebraska comeback. Does that tell us more about Purdue, or still a deficiency, about Nebraska, or still an Achilles, if you will, for Purdue?
I think it was the game becoming what it was supposed to be all along. I think that Nebraska, didn't win its first 20 games of the season by accident. They're playing in a building where Purdue's brought teams just as good, if not better, than this one in here, and really had a hard time winning and got boat raced with its national runner-up team a couple of years ago. Really tough place to win, really good team. I think Nebraska made the shots in the second half that they didn't make in the first half. When you look at their ability to break Purdue down off the dribble and get those corner threes, they missed them all in the first half, and they made them all in the second half. And I think it was more a credit to Nebraska than it was an indictment of Purdue, in my opinion. I think there were 2 cardinal sins Purdue committed. One was those 3 live ball turnovers in the span of 5 possessions really got Nebraska going. Even if they didn't necessarily score off all of them. And then the foul shooting in the final minute of regulation was just inexplicable. You have 3 great foul shooters, 1, 2, 3 going to the foul line with as many as 6 points on the line to put the game away, and you come up with 1 point. That's just inexplicable. I guess that's just basketball, but just really weird. But I think that if you're a Purdue person and you want to celebrate, you got what you were looking for. If you're a Purdue person who wants to freak out, you also got what you're looking for. Me, I think it's more positive about Nebraska than it is an indictment of Purdue. But it also illustrated how good Purdue can be when Purdue is good. I thought they were good defensively in the first half, even though Nebraska got shots it wanted. But I thought Purdue did a really good job. Starting the game, finishing the first half, starting the second half, and then obviously having the wherewithal to win that game in overtime after everything was going against them.
Brian, Purdue, obviously, we know they're starting 5, and with the exception of the fact that they're new in the post this year, there are players with which we're very familiar. But is there any accuracy to this statement? While Purdue has an outstanding starting 5, Purdue's season may be that they go as far as their complementary pieces off the bench can help take them. Is that overstating it?
Probably. I think they go as far as Braden Smith can take them. I think him only turning the ball over once in 40-plus minutes yesterday was situationally enormous for Purdue. But I think the story of last night's game that might get obscured by all the drama and all the, neck-breaking turbulence was the fact that C.J. Cox, who's been shooting not so great in Big Ten play, makes 2 enormous threes for Purdue. Jack Benner makes a really big three, gets a bunch of offensive rebounds. Jakari Harris, I thought, played really, really well. And it was those guys who, were the difference in the game, in a game that really was a game of inches. It was the Al Pacino speech in Any Given Sunday. If Jakari Harris gets to the ball a half second sooner, maybe he's the one who slips. And then he fouls Jamarcus Lawrence, and all of a sudden they're at the foul line to win the game. But it just so happens that he met the ball, did a great job defensively, and Purdue's strategic sweating paid off big.
Yeah, the floor was a little slick there, and I felt bad for the kids
the kid, man.
The kid that's got to towel that up, man.
Hot water,
right?
Yeah. Yes, I would not want to be him today. I feel bad for the kid because, I don't know the details, but look at all the stuff that was going on in front of him. You get this unbelievable college basketball game. You're probably not necessarily paying attention. If Nebraska fans they have a long way to go in terms of getting up to Big Ten standards in terms of toxicity. But if they were fans of a lot of other Big Ten schools, they would have been lighting up Twitter last night about conspiracy theories and Purdue dumping water on the court that Purdue also had to play on. So that wouldn't have made any sense.
Well, and for those unfamiliar with it, what happened was late in the game, Nebraska had an opportunity. They were down. They needed a basket to win the game in overtime, final possession, essentially. And upon the inbound, as the Nebraska player is going towards the ball, basically simultaneously with getting the inbound pass and starting to dribble to move up floor, his feet go right out from underneath him, and he slides right there. And I think it was Harris ends up with the basketball. Like, whoa!
And fouled. Yep.
And was fouled, and then they salted away. So there was clearly a spot of condensation on the floor that. Did that cost Nebraska? They would have still had to make a play, but nonetheless, it was a tough way, obviously, for Nebraska to lose the game. But the bottom line is, Brian, Purdue made plays down the stretch that they needed to make to salt that away, and they answered the bell. Would they have done that at the end of January when they went through that 3-game skid? Was there something just in terms of focus that was missing for Purdue that perhaps last night kind of exercised?
Well, I thought that last night, unlike that stretch in January, rebounding was a huge advantage for Purdue. I think that, it's a little bit of low-calorie meaning because Nebraska is not a great rebounding team, and they don't even try to offensive rebound. Ironically, they almost won the game on a putback. But I think that when Trey Kaufman and Oscar Clough are rebounding the way they did last night, Purdue's really hard to beat, and they did it without fouling, or at least getting called for fouls. That's always in the eye of the beholder. But I think that Purdue just dominating the glass the way they did. Much has been made this year of Purdue being exposed, playing big a little bit with a traditional power forward and a traditional center, even though a lot of people in college basketball are doing that. But if you're going to do that and accept the defensive trade-off that comes with it, you have to have advantages somewhere else. And, Purdue has needed rebounding to maybe not necessarily be something they dominate, but they also can't get beat on the glass the way Illinois beat them a couple weeks ago and things like that. But last night they just completely punked Nebraska out on the glass. And Trey Kaufman looked like Caleb Swanigan, and Oscar Clough getting 10 offensive rebounds. And Jack Benner, when we talk about Purdue's size, Jack Benner, a big guard basically, hustling and throwing his body around, getting Purdue a couple extra possessions. That was the game. As Matt Painter said after the game, Purdue had 20 more possessions than Nebraska, and they needed every single one of them. And that was really a big deal for Purdue.
Brian, do you believe that there's any evidence other than just on the floor results? But when you look at it up close, talk to guys, watch interactions, etc., is there any reason to believe that Purdue could have a chemistry issue?
I don't think so. I think when teams aren't quite as sharp or quite as good as people think they are, I still think Purdue's pretty good. They just have been a little inconsistent. I don't think it's a chemistry issue. I don't know what the issue is, to be honest with you, if there is an issue. I think people tend to gravitate toward dissension when trying to explain things that are otherwise there's no clear explanation for. I think these guys like one another. I think that they've got pretty good chemistry. together. I think that, they've been through ups and downs here this season. I think some of them are playing a little bit different roles. I don't see that being an issue for anybody. You saw Trey Coffin last night, a guy who averaged 20 a game last year, who's averaging 12 right now, if that. This season, he's just kind of said to hell with it. He's just rebounded and passed and played hard, and I think he's having a good year. I don't think he's having the first-team All-American season that people thought he might be able to have based on what he did last year, but the rebounding piece of this has been really big for him. And I thought last night was a really good indication of guys coming off the bench being ready to play, ready to make big shots, and guys willing to, it sounds so hokey to say this, but guys just being willing to do whatever they kind of needed to do for Purdue to win. If that meant rebounding for Trakoff and Wren last night, that's exactly what he did. And you have to give him credit for kind of standing down from an ego perspective when he could be, complaining about shots. He could be complaining about his scoring numbers. But for him to play the way he did last night and play as hard as he did last night, I thought, kind of spoke to a team that just prioritizes winning over all else.
Brian Neubert, my guest. Gold and Black is, of course, where you can read his work. He's on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Brian, up next for Purdue is now, of course, on this road trip where time away from home is at Iowa. They have defeated Iowa already in the first half of this series this year in Mackey. Did so, I think it was a 7 or 8 point game. But Iowa, I think, plucky. I think Iowa actually is a challenge, especially on the road. If you look back to the first matchup of these two, what problems could Iowa potentially create for Purdue, or what areas does Purdue need to shore up from the first meeting?
Man, I barely remember last night. You're asking about a couple weeks ago.
It's that neck rattling turbulence, right?
I'm going to sit down later and try to remember what exactly happened last night. It's all puzzle pieces in the couch cushions here. I remember specific moments, but they're all jumbled up. I have no idea what happened and when. But if I recall that Iowa game, Iowa's guarding people now, which is kind of a novelty for the history of their program recently. They're a good defensive team now under Ben McCollum, and I think, Purdue just played a really good defensive team in Nebraska and did what it needed to do. It didn't turn the ball over wholesale. I thought it did a pretty good job executing. I thought it did a good job improvising when, stuff got knocked out. Fletcher Lawyers played Oscar Clough for the game winner, being the prime example. But I think Purdue's just going to have to keep guarding the way they're guarding on Bennett Sturtz, the way they did on Price Sanford last night, and some other guys. Some of the more combustible shooters Nebraska has didn't really do a whole lot last night. I think that's a credit to Purdue's defense. They're going to have to keep doing that. They're going to have to keep being physical on defense and physical on the glass without fouling. When you look at last night, getting Rink masked out of the game in overtime was huge. But also Oscar Clough and Trey Coffin not picking up a ton of cheap fouls when they're, basically trying to beat the hell out of Nebraska on the glass. So all of that stuff, you have to be really disciplined against Iowa, and just be the best version of yourself for 40 minutes. Purdue has had a consistency issue here the last couple weeks. So just finishing those first halves well, starting those second halves well, starting the game well, obviously finishing the game well. That's a lot of game I just covered there, but some of those things were not Purdue's strength for a couple weeks.
Brian, I just try to be the best version of myself for 180 minutes per day, and I will not lie to you. There have been some consistency issues, just so you know.
Yeah, I try to set the bar as low as possible and exceed it more often than not.
Well, listen, you help out in my being the best version of myself for at least 10 of the 180 minutes, so it's greatly appreciated. Takeaways: glasses half full, tenacity on the glass, and more from Purdue's win at Nebraska is the latest from Brian Neubert. You can read it at goldandblack.com, part, of course, of the On3 and Rivals Network online. Brian, a pleasure as always, man. Appreciate it.
No problem, Jake. Thanks, man.
All right, Brian Neubert joining us from Gold and Black. Eddie, how much of the last night, I know you were working the Pacer game, when you get home, I mentioned yesterday that the Olympics to me are kind of like the World Cup that I enjoy, just the opportunity of having it on in the background, and there's kind of always something there to watch. How much have you paid attention to the Olympics to this point?
Here and there. I'm watching it right now over here in in the producer room.
What? Well, thanks for paying attention.
You're
What?
welcome.
What events are on right now?
The mogul.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the women's mogul is on right now. Very fascinating to me.
Now, those are important business people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What is your favorite event? What is your favorite Olympic event that you otherwise never watch?
Bobsled
Yeah, that's always cool.
or curling.
The luge is cool. Curling is cool too. Have you ever done curling?
I have not.
There's an Indianapolis curling club. They were kind enough to invite me out a couple of years ago.
It's up in Fishers, isn't it?
Yeah, when I did it, it was over at the Coliseum, but yes. And it was great. The kind of sliding along and letting go of the disc, it takes a second because you're worried that you're going to fall over. And then you don't realize it, but the sweeping of the brooms, there is a strategy there because you're either trying to create ice shavings in front of the disc if you feel it's going too fast.
Yep.
Or you're trying to, if it's going too slow and it needs more speed, then you're trying to smooth out the ice. And also you can direct it that way as well. It was fun. I mean, it was basically shuffleboard on ice. I know people always use that terminology, but it was fun. But in terms of the Olympics, are we going international again?
We are.
I like this.
Not Amory Tiernan, though, this time.
That's correct. Zach Keefer is with The Athletic. He has been over in Milano, Cortino, or just Cortino, Milan, whichever way you want to say it. Basically, he's in Italy at the Olympics and going to join us to talk about that and more next.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, Zach Keefer is over in Italy covering the Olympic Games for The Athletic. More on some of those topics and stories in a second. But when we join him here on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, it is my understanding that he is in like a media shuttle bus in Italy as we speak. Zach, I realize that over there it would be 6:30 if I'm not mistaken, so probably after sunset. But can you just kind of set the scene for the geography around you and where it is that you're headed?
Yes, sir. I am in the Italian Alps, which might be the most breathtaking place on the planet I've ever seen. I'm covering events in Livigno, and I'm based in Bormio. So the long story, Jake, is I basically take a 90-minute shuttle every morning and then every evening for the duration of the games to get to the events I'm covering, which is snowboarding and free skiing and stuff like that.
And you're staying where exactly? And actually, let me rephrase that. So if you are in the Alps and the games themselves and the opening ceremonies were in Milan, if I'm not mistaken. So the epicenter is kind of Milan, and that's the indoor stuff you see, curling, things like that, I believe are Milan. To use Indiana, Zach, geography, the difference between the two locales would be if Milan is Italy, then the area you are is where in terms of geographically in comparison? If Milan is Indianapolis.
Yeah, so this is like the one thing that I had to learn, and it's really hard to explain. Like everyone's like, oh, were you there when Lindsey Vonn crashed? Like that's 4 hours away. So if Milan is Indianapolis, I'm like in Detroit. I'm like way up north in the mountains. It's a completely different world, and like I haven't even been able to follow, some of the other events that are going on in like the bigger cities like hockey and curling and figure skating. Because we're like in our own little world out here. But I'm in this little town called Bormio, and it's maybe just like the most gorgeous little town I've ever seen. It's famous for the Stelvio, which is like this unbelievable ski mountain that they have. And it's lit up at night with these lights along the ski slope. It's one of the most dangerous ski slopes in the world. And I'm telling you, man, it's just unbelievable to come home and see that every night in this little Italian town and drink some wine, have some pizza, and figure out how I'm going to get back to Livigno the next day.
How are the people? I don't know how much interaction you've been able to have with some of the locals, but if you have, how have they been?
They've been great. And the one thing that's crazy about the Olympics is obviously the entire world is here. And so we're really close to Switzerland. We're basically in Switzerland. We're so far north in Italy. And Switzerland's like one of the biggest power players in the Winter Games because these are their sports. And so when we walk around town, it's like I've been to all these Super Bowls and you can feel like, the Eagles fans and the Chiefs fans. The Swiss fans are like the most boisterous when it comes to skiing because it's their bread and butter.
Right.
So it's really cool and like eye-opening to experience that. And like when their guys and their girls don't win, like they're ticked off. So it's a different world. And I'm definitely seeing a lot more international fans than Team USA fans.
Zach, one of the things I find interesting, Zach Keefer is our guest, Java House Peel and Pour guest line. He's over in Italy, in the Alps as we speak here. One of the things that I find interesting in reading your articles and the coverage that you've done so far is profiling athletes that in the Olympics are participating, either having recently come off injury or, at some point you have, obviously we know about Lindsey Vonn, but there are so many stories like that, okay? Have you noticed when you talk to an athlete that is coming back, a skier that's coming back from a devastating injury, and you've profiled a couple of these, do you find, Zach, that these athletes that are Olympians have an overwhelming resiliency that allows them to come back from such an injury, and that sort of resiliency over the course of their career is the reason they're an Olympian? Or is it that because they're an Olympian, they're forced to find a resiliency because of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity before them?
I would lean towards the latter. But you're onto something because, look, my day job is the NFL, where the injury rate is 100%. This is no different. And Ryan Cochran-Siegel, who I encourage everyone listening to, follow, because this dude just balled out and got a silver medal over here against the Swiss powerhouse skiers that I just mentioned. No one thought he was going to get silver 4 years ago. He did. No one thought he was going to get silver today, and he did. And I talked to him at length in November and December about his journey. And I mean, this guy shredded his knee and had 4 surgeries. He came literally like millimeters away from never skiing again after breaking his collarbone. And it could have been a spinal injury if it got worse. And I was talking to him about the NFL and how so many guys get hurt and all that. And he's like, well, it's really the same except for one big difference. Like someone else is inflicting pain upon them. I'm doing this to myself. It is absolutely wild, Jake, to see these ski slopes in person and to realize that these guys are going down them north of 80 miles an hour in spandex. I mean, one flinch, one slip on the ice, one wrong turn, as you saw with Lindsey Vonn. I mean, these are not just like injuries; these are like total fractures. And we had a nasty, scary one today in the half pipe women's qualifying, where this Chinese snowboarder was down for 15 minutes and she had to be, exited on a sled. And I mean, just really horrific stuff. So it's the severity, the stakes, it's all really, really high. And they are just incredibly courageous athletes to stick through it. And all of them have been through multiple surgeries to get here.
Is there a sport, Zach, or maybe even a skill set within an Olympic sport that this experience for you has really opened your eyes towards? Or I guess a better way of asking it would simply be the thing that 5 years from now, when you look back on your experience in covering the Olympic Games, that you're going to say to yourself, what I gained that I never anticipated gaining as an experience was what?
I think it's an appreciation for the absurdity. So you know this sport really well, the Indianapolis 500. I will watch the first lap of the Indianapolis 500 from the stands, from the media center, wherever, and watch these drivers go 230 to 240 miles an hour and think to myself, how is this legal? This is crazy, right? Like every year it hits me again, like that's okay, that's still something we do. And I kind of had the same feeling watching these skiers go down these mountains at 80 miles an hour, like I just mentioned, wearing nothing but, a centimeter's worth of spandex. It's crazy to think about. Like, I'm a really bad skier, and I've tried it a couple of times, and I fall a lot. And, like, these guys, like, what they do is borderline, like, is this okay? And, there have been deaths. Like, borderline, like, they are flirting with death almost every time. And my colleague Charlotte Harper wrote this great story today about, like, the nerves and the mental warfare they go through at the top of a hill. And one of them said, like, hey, I could die today. Like, that's what we're talking about. And there's not that many stories where sports, where that doesn't feel hyperbolic, but it doesn't here because they are very much tickling death every time they ski down these mountains.
When you cover the NFL, Zach, you see Zach Keefer, my guest from The Athletic. Obviously in the National Football League, no matter what two franchises are playing, guys are familiar with the guys on the other team. They do the jersey swap afterwards. They're guys they played against in college and et cetera. And I realize that no matter what sport it is in the Olympic Games, these athletes are esoterically, professionally competing in the non-Olympic years against those that they're seeing. So there is familiarity there. But there still are nations that can be represented that are of, not within the normal scheduling of said sport. Do you see familiarity amongst the athletes across the board, or are oftentimes athletes going against people of countries and other such that they've never met before, and the Olympics are the only thing that bonds them?
That's another thing that's been so unique. They all know each other, and they all root for each other, at least in the events that I'm covering. Like, these are all, counterculture kids, right, that grew up in Salt Lake or Park City, the Americans at least, or Colorado Springs or Steamboat, and were in skis at 2 years old, or was in a snowboard at 6 years old and never got out of it, right? Like, Chloe Kim was asked today about, like she hadn't competed in 10 months, and she's got a dislocated shoulder, and she gets out there today, and she completely dominates the first run of snowboarding quals. And everyone afterward is like, any rust? Like, were you, rusty at all? And she's like, I've been snowboarding for 22 years. Like, I can snowboard better than I can walk. So they all grew up together, and they grew up competing against each other. And it's not as cutthroat as you think. Like, Alex Hall is such a refreshing professional athlete. He won silver yesterday in the slope style event where you ski down the hill and do a bunch of tricks on your way down. And he was like literally rooting for the other guys at the end of his run yesterday, like to beat him. Like just because like they don't root against each other. They want their competitors to land their jumps, to pull off their tricks. It is certainly not what I see in the NFL. And it's almost, in the American way is like win or else. He's a little bit different in that regard. And it's been refreshing. They certainly root for each other and they're all friends. And it's very different in a lot of ways than what I'm used to.
What's the best story you've witnessed?
I'll tell you this. Maddie Shafrick is an American snowboarder, and she was left in tears today because she didn't make the final. And I just reached out to her to tell her, thank you for letting me write about her a couple of weeks ago. She turned pro at 14. She quit at 20 because she hated snowboarding. She hated it. She was depressed. She went to AA. She went to her parents' basement because she had no money, and she ended up working as a plumber. And then she got into coaching a little bit and decided to give it one last shot as a 30-year-old. And I'm telling you, all these snowboarders out here are like 17, 18, 19, 20. And she was 30, and she made it. Like, she qualified for the U.S. Olympic team in December and January. She made it all the way here. She was really bummed that she didn't make the finals today, but I told her, like, forget the medals, like, forget the success. Like, that's what the Olympics are about. And it was really cool to see that. 30 years old, making her first Olympic team after working as a plumber not that long ago.
So, needless to say, crafty on the half pipe, right? I mean, would that be pretty obvious if you're a plumber going into snowboarding? Do you want to use that? I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first to come up with that, right?
Jake, I wrote 1,600 words on her and did not think of that one time.
Well,
I'm kind of ashamed, but I'm also not surprised that you noticed it.
I do what I can. Were you able to go to, Zach, the opening ceremonies?
No, Milan is like 5 hours away.
Okay, so I didn't know if like you went, A to B or, but you're in that area. So the areas that you are covering, obviously, snowboarding, skiing, that's pretty much everything in the area where you are. Not that that's not a lot. I mean, there's plenty there, right?
Yeah, and then next week I get into ski mountaineering, which is new, which essentially might be the most grueling sport on the planet. They climb a mountain with skis, then they change into different skis and ski down it. And they do this over and over again. I think it's got to be like right up there with triathlons is like the most grueling sport on the planet. So I'm anxious to dig into that one.
It's a fascinating journey for you. I think everybody would say that they're envious. I know that you are aware of the fortune you have in doing it, but more importantly, the responsibility of helping bring it to us, which you do with each and every time that you write 1,600 words or whatever it may be on the different athletes. Everything from athletes skiing with a cadaver in them after multiple surgeries to coming back from, personal despair, all of it covered at The Athletic with Zach Keefer. Zach, appreciate the time as always. How many people are on the bus, by the way, right now?
There's two. One of them's driving, thank goodness, and me. We had a couple drop off a couple minutes ago, so it's an empty bus right now.
You got the whole bus to yourself?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a long trip. I'm telling you, it's not ideal.
The driver is Italian, obviously, right?
Yes.
How far away are you sitting from the driver?
I'm about a couple feet from behind him.
Does he speak English? Can you get him to say in Italian, like, Query and Company, it's beautiful to be in the company? Can you get him to say that, like, really loud?
I'm a little nervous to ask because we are on the side of a mountain right now, and if he takes his focus off, you might hear the end of me and the end of him.
This guy does it all
seconds.
the time, Zach. Okay, fine. It's like, listen, this guy driving around that mountain is the same as you trying to navigate the width of Meridian Street between 42nd and 44th. You've done it a million times, right? You get a bump here and there, it happens.
Let's put it this way. I have bought Dramamine and Pepto-Bismol for these drives because they are taxied on the stomach.
Fair enough. All right, well, keep it between the lines, Zach. Appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Zach Keefer joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Very good stuff and fascinating stuff. And I tell you, now it makes me want to go there. I mean, I've been to Italy, but not into the Alps of Italy. And I've been to the Alps, but not the Alps of Switzerland or Italy. And that sounds like it would be absolutely beautiful. No question about it. By the way, big show lined up for you today. Nick Gardner also going to join us coming up at the bottom of the 1 o'clock hour. But when we come back, we'll get back into what did happen last night for the Pacers in New York and how fortune might have just happened to come their way, and sometimes that's what you need in basketball in the first half of a two-step that could work out well for them. I'll explain next. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. You know, that time of year where the weather's all over the place, so your taste may change. No problem. Surfside has you covered. How about, for example, the new blackberry half and half? That's iced tea, lemonade, and that splash of vodka. Raspberry tea half and half. Mango half and half. All of it available, of course, from Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. Surfside is 100 calories, just 2 grams of sugar, and no carbonation, so smooth. Perfect for any occasion. Surfside, look for it wherever you buy your favorite adult beverages. Please be 21, and please drink responsibly.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
By the way, we prefer to call that the Brooklyn Nets.
It's a Sega Baba tonight for the Pacers. It's worth reminding, Jake, this is the third Sega Baba in the last couple of weeks for the Pacers. And in the previous two Sega Babas, TJ McConnell,
second
Pascal
game of a back-to-back.
Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith have all missed.
So is there any belief that they will rest players tonight, even though you're going into the break?
I know there's not been an injury report filed by the Pacers yet for the game tonight, but I would expect so, because if you look at the bench last night, all the two-way guys were there, and they were all dressed. Or not dressed, but they were all on the bench.
Right.
That's Ethan Thompson, Talon Peter, those guys.
So they're all available, right?
Well, they weren't available last night, but you would assume were. Yeah, they're there on this trip.
Not that anybody cares, but I'm undefeated in my public league fantasy basketball league, but I have Andrew Nembhard. Should I rest him tonight? Should I bench him?
Do you have somebody that you can replace in the starting lineup?
I can put in any of these three. VJ Edgecombe in his place. That's one option. Keyshawn George is an option, and then Dyson Daniels. Dyson Daniels also day-to-day, though. Your thoughts?
I'd probably go. Who did the 76ers play tonight?
I could move Jalen Suggs or Drew Holiday into the guard position and then put Derek Queen in also.
Man, you've got options.
I do.
Optionality.
That's why I'm undefeated. You let me know what you think. Now, sometimes life is about timing. Sometimes fortune comes your way. And, what do we say? That sometimes fortune rewards the bold? Sometimes also just the patient or the lucky. And the Pacers have not had tremendous luck. It goes without saying. Since winning Game 6. Things have more often than not bounced the direction opposite of where they would like it to. There is no doubt about that. There have been, and I don't need to necessarily sit here and run down for you every possible scenario that could have gone one way for them that went the way of the opposite of what you hoped or anticipated. Because there are a plenty of options to go with in terms of if you were to spell out why the basketball gods seem to have a vendetta against the Pacers. It goes back to when Tim Kazurinsky used to do the Questions of Life on Saturday Night Live in 1982, and 9-year-old Jake is watching it and sees him, and one of his questions is, what does God have against the Indiana Pacers? And I was thrilled to see Indiana represented on Saturday Night Live as a native of Indiana, and then I was devastated because I realized it was a commentary on where the Pacers ranked at the time. But maybe, just maybe, finally, timing and the basketball gods for the first time in some 6 months went the way of Indiana. I'll explain on the other side. And Nick Gardner coming up bottom of the 1 o'clock hour.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Now, when it comes to music, Eddie Garrison is a little bit of an older soul. I think greatly influenced by his parents of the music they played. One of the truer lines ever said in an Adam Sandler movie, which there aren't a lot of true lines said in Adam Sandler movies, but in the movie Big Daddy.
Oh, I thought you were going to reference The Wedding Singer.
Also a good movie.
Yeah, I didn't know if you're going to reference that song that sustains a few words that we can't say.
No. If you recall, in Big Daddy, the character that he plays is a diehard fan of Styx.
Yeah.
And he teaches the kid to say that Styx is one of the most underrated bands of all time. I actually tend to agree with that. I think Styx is pretty solid. You know, not like, I don't think anybody thinks of it as their mainstream number one band, but pretty solid.
You think there's a bigger actor or celebrity that's more approachable than Adam Sandler? Like, you could go up to him, probably strike up a conversation. He'd be just like, yeah, I'm an ordinary dude.
You know what? I've seen a couple of videos, though, where he seems a little standoffish, right?
Really?
Yeah. McConaughey.
Oh, yeah.
I think I told you and we'll get into my Pacer thing here in a second. My buddy that was a doctor in Austin, Texas, got together with a bunch of his friends, and they were watching NFL games, a bunch of the other doctors all rooting for their, favorite teams.
Mm-hmm.
And McConaughey happened to be in the bar, and my buddy went up to the bar to get another round of wings or beers or whatever, and looked over, and McConaughey was literally sitting there, and he's like, oh my God. I guess McConaughey's pretty known around Austin, just being a dude around town, but my buddy, holy cow, it's kind of did a double take, introduces himself. McConaughey was cool, whatever. My buddy was like, yeah, I'm just here with a bunch of doctors. We live we all grew up all over, so we come and watch games on Sundays. And McConaughey's like, oh man, that's really cool. And then games come to an end, and tab comes, and the waiter says, by the way, Matthew McConaughey paid for all you guys. So I always thought that was pretty cool. But Adam Sandler does seem like a cool dude, don't get me wrong.
Owen Wilson is another one of those, probably. Wow.
I like Owen Wilson. A couple of notes real quick from the text line. This from Richard. Jake, here's my Olympian feat for the day. Grinding the rust off a 40-foot container roof, getting it ready for painting. Not bad for a 74-year-old who's had hip and femurs screwed back together with 9 screws last June after a car crash.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Listening to the show makes it so much better. That from Richard.
We just got tougher today, Jake.
Richard, that is awesome. And Richard sent pictures.
He should teach the Colts players some things about toughness.
A little bit of grit, right?
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Also, our buddy trucker, Chiefs fan Steve. And Steve is out on the injured reserve as well after having surgery on his shoulder. But his wife, Brenda, routinely posts pictures of their dog, the best dog of the show, Milton, the little rescue dog. And Milton's a senior citizen these days for sure, but I love seeing on the regular Brenda posting pictures of Milton going with her to work and all the different things that Milton does. And it just consistently reminds me, as Eddie and I both know, that if you are out there, and I would ask that you, of course, only commit if you are willing to commit for the lifetime of it. But if you are contemplating adding a pet to the family and you go to the Humane Society or any of the shelters and get a rescue pet, I can assure you and promise you, Boo, Milton, the rest of them are all testament to the fact they are absolutely aware of the fact that you are rescuing them, and you will not be sorry.
My parents' dog, Rudy, falls into that category as well.
Rudy, you were dog sitting the other day, right?
Yes.
Rudy is a very cool dog. So the Pacers' fortune, this is a franchise that you could certainly make the case and the argument that when it comes to trajectory-altering events, has been on the wrong side more than the right. You've heard me mention before, for that matter, going way back. Going back to when, and I was just talking to Joe Koppel, our colleague, about this. Alex English was a promising young player for the Indiana Pacers in the infancy of their NBA days. And a struggling franchise that was trying to curry any sort of favor within its fan base and within this market because it had made the transition from the ABA, where it was a dominant franchise, into the NBA, where it was fledgling, obviously. And one of the things that the Pacers took into consideration was, efforts and ways in which they could generate interest locally and maintain the relationship they had with the city that they had built up over the course of becoming a dominant ABA franchise. And one of the assistant coaches for the Denver Nuggets, who had George McGinnis on their roster, towards the end of his career, George McGinnis, formerly, glory years of obviously Pacers, ABA, and then with the 76ers and NBA co-MVP and all of those things. Or maybe it was MVP runner-up, but either way, George McGinnis, a star player, but in the twilight of his career. And the Denver Nuggets had an assistant coach who had coached Alex English in college at South Carolina and said, you know what, call Indiana and see if they maybe will want to sell some tickets by getting George McGinnis to come back and do some car ads for them, and we'll take Alex English off their hands. And so the Pacers made that move. And one of the most prolific career scorers in the history of the game went to Denver and left Indiana behind. And that executive, as I've told before, would later, Larry Brown was the head coach of the Nuggets and had brought with him his old college teammate as an assistant, which was the one that facilitated that deal. And once Larry Brown had his time come to an end in Denver, George Irvin then went to Indiana and brought along with him that assistant coach, Donnie Walsh, who would ascend himself into the front office and make a lot of shrewd moves for Indiana on their behalf. But that was the first of a number of things where things just didn't work out for Indiana. Then, of course, you had, I'm talking about that move with Alex English. Then you had, in 1983, I still remember it like it was yesterday, being a kid at Allisonville Elementary School and WIBC, our sister station, they pumped into, true story, the PA system at school so that we could listen to the WIBC broadcast of the NBA coin flip to find out if the Pacers would land the number 1 overall pick and be able to get Ralph Sampson. And, of course, the coin flip went the way of Houston, and the Pacers ended up with Steve Stepanovich. Nice player, don't get me wrong, but not Ralph Sampson. That, of course, was just 2 years before the Wayman Tisdale, Patrick Ewing, frozen bent envelope of the NBA draft lottery. And you can go on and on and on. And sometimes things finally go your way. And I think what we just saw was exactly that. The Pacers knew they needed a center. They knew that, and I will give them credit, a ton of credit. There were a lot of uncertainties about this roster coming off of the Halliburton injury and everything going into this season, how they were going to play. And I don't know that anybody was planned for the Miles Turner departure because of the way in which it happened. I think Indiana certainly felt like they were going to be given a legitimate chance to retain him and that they were going to be essentially just out Halliburton for the year and then come back with the band back together for next season. And obviously that changed. So I'll give them credit for the acquisition of Jay Huff, a move they probably did not anticipate having to make. And Jay Huff does fit the style in which Indiana wants to play for the majority of time. A stretch center that can hit the three, that can protect the rim, block some shots, and run with them a little bit. But the one area where Jay Huff does lack or lag is the physical strength of the consistency to play down on the block. And that was an area that Miles Turner, it was not a strong suit of him defensively, but Turner was one that maybe he didn't play a lot through contact, but he was very, and still is in Milwaukee with his style of play, more of a faster paced center. So Indiana took care of that a little bit, the half of it with Jay Huff of a fast-paced guy, but they lacked still the muscle down low. And they knew that they needed to take care of that, and that's where, Ivica Zubac comes into play. Because this is a player that Indiana has had their eye on for a while. There are a number of guys that I think, if you read the message boards, to use an older term, but, if you looked at social media articles and listened to different things, there were a handful of players that were consistently mentioned as possibilities for the Pacers. Certainly coming out of New Orleans, coming out of Atlanta. Jarrett Allen, any center that has a little bit of quicker pace about them potential. And Walker Kessler being hurt in Utah was mentioned to everybody. I mean, every team that was looking for a center. But Zubac is a name that was consistently linked to Indiana. And I don't know this, but I go back to the summer of what year, Eddie, was the LeBron James summer of I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Was that 2010? 11?
I believe it was 2010, yes.
I
Yeah,
recall
2010.
a few years before that.
July 8th.
A few years before that, so beginning in like 07 or 08, you started hearing links of every team, rumors of every team. Just so you know, you're probably going to see some weird moves being made by the Suns because they're clearing cap space so that they're going to have the money to go after LeBron James in 2010. Every team was doing it. Everybody was whispering about it at first. And then you figured out that everybody had the same game plan. And that was clear the space and push all in. And teams, if you recall back then, all of the franchises started coming up with elaborate, expensive, detailed, strategic recruiting pitches to LeBron. The teams that were in play, it was the Clippers, it was the Knicks, it was obviously Cleveland, obviously Miami. The Lakers maybe were one that he allowed, but he narrowed it down to like 6 teams, and he basically said, all right, here's the deal. I know that in New York, and I can assure you 100% factually, James Dolan and the brass of the New York Knicks put together an entire thing to pitch to LeBron James. They were going to fly him in. They were going to put him on a helicopter and fly him around Manhattan. They were going to have a dinner with Fat Joe. They were going to have Donald Trump involved as a New York City mogul at the time. All of it. And they had a whole thing on how they were going to woo him to New York. And I'm sure Miami thought the same of what they were going to do. Everybody thought they were outthinking everyone else. And then LeBron James and his camp, if you will, basically said, you know what, we're going to make this easy on everybody. You'll be able to come out to Akron, meet us in our offices, and you get 2 hours to make your pitch. And it was even across the board, and then he chose Miami. The reason I'm saying all of that is because you maybe are about to see the same thing happening when it comes to Giannis. Giannis and the perception or the understanding or the assumption across the league, across the world of sports, across all of it, that Giannis wants out in Milwaukee, what you are going to see is a bunch of teams lining up to say, you know what? Let's clear cap space. Let's make room. But Giannis is an international star. And he's played, and I give him credit for this, in Milwaukee, a middle market city, and brought them a championship. But now he wants out. So you would assume that if he wants out, franchises are going to look at it similar to the way they looked at the LeBron sweepstakes. And they're going to say, okay, this guy probably is going to narrow it down to wanting to play in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. I think Chicago might have been in the play for LeBron as well. Miami, etc. I don't think there are a lot of people that believe that Giannis, if he can pick his destination, is like, let's go Memphis. Let's go Bourbon Street. I'm going to the Pelicans. And one of those franchises that one would assume was interested in Giannis or is trying to put themselves in position, amongst many, would be the Clippers.
Yeah.
And let's go back to, again, going off precedent and putting together the pieces of the puzzle here of being online detective, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I have always felt when Trent Richardson was traded to the Indianapolis Colts, sorry to bring up for all of you an open wound, but when Trent Richardson was traded to the Colts, what happened just before that? Two things happened. The first is Vic Ballard, who had played well as a rookie, got hurt and all of a sudden was out. And the second is when that happened, the owner of the Colts took to social media to drum up interest in his franchise, to get his fans excited, to let them know that all was in control. Because this still was relatively recently after Bill Polian had left the franchise, and people were curious about the direction of the Indianapolis Colts, the solidarity of the Indianapolis Colts, the decision-making of the Indianapolis Colts. And Jim Irsay wanted to let the fan base know all is cool in the neighborhood. I know you're all freaked out because Vic Ballard went down, but don't worry. Griggs is wheeling and dealing. And that's when you started seeing the post. Seismic whopper. A tsunami land. Lightning and thunder. And he was going on and on about the whopper that Ryan Grigson would land. And don't worry about the fact that our running back went down. Griggs has it all under control. And it is my belief, simply that, but it is my belief that at that time, the Cleveland Browns, because Ryan Grigson later and the Colts both later admitted that it was the Browns that initiated the first phone call in regards to Trent Richardson, a guy who was coming off a pretty productive rookie year and a prolific college career and was a top 3 pick in the same draft as Andrew Luck. And it is my belief that the Cleveland Browns called the Colts and said, your owner is going on and on about how you need to land a whopper, and let me make you an offer about the flame-broiled sandwich we've got for you. A top 3 pick, an 800-yard back as a rookie, a prolific career. Imagine him with Andrew Luck. Make us an offer. And the Browns were proactive in making that phone call because they basically got rumblings that Indianapolis was in the market. I think it's entirely possible that what you have now when it comes to the move that the Pacers just made was the Pacers looked at it and said, we need a center. And that's not to say that Los Angeles is putting an ad on Facebook Marketplace to make an offer for their center. But if Indiana had gotten word, or even themselves speculated without getting word about it out of Los Angeles, that the Clippers might be trying to clear cap space in order to get themselves into position to get Giannis, and Indiana knows that there's a piece there on a very friendly contract, mind you, that fits exactly what Indiana wants, then it would have been wise of Indiana to, in this point, play the part of the Cleveland Browns. Hey, guys, let me tell you what the word on the street is. Let me tell you what the anticipation is. You've got the expectation, the possibility, the rumblings of landing yourself a whopper, of getting the big shock and awe, shock and lightning of bringing Giannis to Los Angeles as a Clipper. But you're going to have to make room at the inn. And in that event, what if we told you that we have 2 young players, both of which are on contracts, one of which is about to expire, and we're willing to send that to you to take a contract back that is locked in for you for a few years in Zubats, albeit a friendly term deal. Not a big number, but you've got to start carving space. So why not take on 2 contracts, the bigger of the 2 of which is about to expire? And Indiana, in this circumstance, for a franchise that has been very savvy with their trades over the years, but at times things just have not in timing fell their way. This may be one of them where the timing was there and the savviness was there. I don't know if any of that factually, I was not told any of that. There are times where I will say things on the air and I'll say, I've been told this, or what if I told you this. This is not one of those. This is strictly me connecting dots of potentially what went down. But either way, they now have themselves a starting center. And in addition to that, and yes, we don't know when we will see him on the floor. There's no urgency of that other than what we talked about, trying to get the timing down with Pascal Siakam, the big thing. But a big part of that timing and spacing with Siakam, spacing's probably the better word here. A lot of that is going to come down to working with Halliburton, which, of course, he's not on the floor yet. But last night, I think what you saw is the reminder. And I think it's important for the Pacers to remind themselves of this, let alone other franchises. But if you look, is there any coincidence? I will ask you, Eddie Garrison, as the producer of the Pacers radio network. The Pacers in the last month, their two best efforts or their two best wins are which two?
At Oklahoma City and at New York last night.
Okay.
You can make the case last night, soon it was the most impressive win of the season.
Okay. At Oklahoma City and at New York last night.
Yeah.
Last year, and by last year I mean 8 months ago, the Indiana Pacers found themselves one half away from an NBA title. Who are the last two franchises that they had to play in series in the postseason?
Oklahoma City and New York.
I think what you saw last night, as I mentioned off the top of the show, Joaquin Phoenix did a documentary, a mockumentary, if you will, some 15, 18 years ago called I'm Still Here. And it was a documentary that was done to show the absurdity of benefit of the doubt that celebrities get once they reach a point of their celebrity. And of course, it was most notably recognized when he went on David Letterman and acted completely out to lunch. And people are like, what in the world is going on with Joaquin Phoenix? And it generated all this discussion. Did you see Joaquin Phoenix on Letterman? Man, he had no idea what was going on. Letterman, the first thing he said is, what can you tell us about your time with the Unabomber? Man, he was just completely out there. Then you later find out it's because he and his brother-in-law, Casey Affleck, were doing a documentary about what happens once you become famous enough that people just always believe in you. And so he wanted to see how far he could push it and still get people to buy into whatever he was peddling. And it was all a ruse. And the name of the documentary is I'm Still Here, because what he wanted to let you know was, even though you saw this wacky character on, doing a music rap career and going into nightclubs and whatever else, it still is Joaquin Phoenix, and the brilliance of understanding the art of it all is still there. And I think for the Indiana Pacers, what you've seen is that, yes, they've had to undergo a makeover. Yes, they've had to change their roster. Yes, they've had to play with players because of injury this year that normally wouldn't get on the floor. But they wanted you to know we're still here. And they sent that message last night again. When we need to and push all in, we're still there, even though right now we're masquerading as a team that is trying to get itself in keeping one of those top 4 picks. And I thought last night was a really good win. But at the same time, you also scoreboard watch it and go, okay, are they still within range of those top 4? And I think that dichotomy is something to watch as we continue forward. Butler is in action tonight, taking on Connecticut. One of the best, Danny Hurley and the fast-paced Huskies and the Indiana Mr. Basketball. Nick Gardner, Butler Radio, will be, of course, on the call for it. Will help us break it down next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
One of the best programs in college basketball taking on Butler tonight, 7:30 tip, the Dogs in UConn. You can hear it on our sister station, Fuego, coming up again, 7:30 tonight. Pregame at 7 o'clock. Nick Gardner will be on the radio call for it. And, Nick, reality is this is a challenge for Butler because trying to get back in the win column, but it comes not only against one of the best teams in the country, but in addition to that, where Butler has had to, and I want to get into this first and foremost because it's not necessarily, a mainline statistical player, but anytime that you have somebody that goes down and is a rotational player, it can impact how you slot things. And I'm talking about Xavier Robinson, the kid from Indianapolis that we now know is out for the year with injury. How does that alter, if any way, the Thad Matta approach?
Thanks for having me, Jake. I think it alters it big time. I mean, you go back to the start of, November, December, it was thought that Xavier was going to be a backup point guard, right? Jalen Jackson was here. He was the veteran. He goes down earlier in the season. And now, just as I really thought Xavier had really, he had kind of carved out his role and the game had slowed down for him at times. Thought he looked really good, at Seton Hall and some of these wins. And then just when you feel like you're getting some momentum, he goes down and now he's out. So now, you're dealing with a third point guard that you're going to have to go in and start. So there's a lot of tweaking you have to do. And frankly, because of the roster and because of having to swing some people around, a loss at point guard, it changes a couple different positions just because of how the team is built. So it certainly does change things. And there's no tougher challenge than what they face tonight with UConn coming in and a UConn team coming in, Jake, off of their first loss in a couple months, having dropped one to St. John's last week.
And I want to get to that, Nick. I mean, you played, the game. You played for Butler, so you know this aspect of it from a psychological standpoint. When you look at Butler and, you talk about coming off of a loss. With Butler dropping a game in double overtime at Providence, in a game maybe they felt like obviously in double overtime, you could have had it. But getting that close and then dropping that sort of a tough game, and then you turn around against Marquette, who is completely regrouping this year, and you get beat on the road by 15. How much of that do you think is hangover from being so close yet so far in Providence?
It's hard to say. I think it's absolutely something that if you're a coach, you've got to think about and try to avoid at all costs. I mean, you're talking about a game where you had 2 free throws to win that with just over. They ended up putting some time back on, but it was about a second left roughly. And so I think that's the challenge, right, for coaches. And whether it be coming off a tough loss, whether it be something else outside of basketball that these guys are dealing with, how are you able to get your group to be ready to go at their best, playing free, playing easy, playing, again, at their best and as well as they can, 32 or 33 times a night or a season with all that stuff going on. And so, but it's human nature to do that. And I think that's the challenge that these coaches have. It's hard to say how much it affected Butler. I thought in that Marquette game, the Dogs, they didn't start out great, but they were really grinding and kind of hanging in there. And then Marquette got some turnovers. They made like 5 threes to start that second half. And then it kind of snowballed on them. But that is absolutely a challenge. And to me, in college these days, that's really one of your biggest challenges. How do you get your guys to be ready to go night in and night out with all the other stuff going on, including how you may have dropped a game or how do you handle success if you won it? That's really the challenge in coaching to me.
Nick, what has jumped out at you? Nick Gardner's my guest, Java House Peel and Pork guest line. Butler in Connecticut tonight, 7:30 tip. Obviously, UConn has Braylon Mullins from Greenfield Central, the Mr. Basketball. And it looks like he's been good really out of the womb for Connecticut. You saw him score double digits first go round with Butler. But in looking at Connecticut and their style and what Danny Hurley does, what has jumped out at you about Mullins and maybe even some of the footing that he's had here of late in the last month?
I'll tell you what I was impressed with is, as you said, he was hurt early. So he didn't play early, but he started 13 games now. He's played 17. And like I go back, one of the first games I caught when he was playing was in late January, Jake. It was against Providence, ironically, and they were down late in that game. I mean, they are running stuff for Braylon Mullins in late clock situations, in like crucial situations already, right? That was, late January of his freshman year in the Big East. I mean, that was probably 10 or so games in, not even. So that's really, and he's delivered as well. And then also just reading and hearing how glowingly Dan Hurley talks of Braylon Mullins. I think he's a guy that Coach Hurley really likes being around. I think sometimes when you get at a program like UConn, there can be a lot of stuff outside of just basketball with high-level recruits. And it sounds like Dan Hurley appreciates, man, it's a lot of just ball with Braylon Mullins, and he has stepped up and delivered. And they're a really, really balanced team, and that's what makes them so tough to cover because they run really good stuff, and they can run something for basically everybody out on the floor. And that's not always the case with teams. Usually there's 2 or 3 guys that you're running stuff for. Man, there's all 5 guys. Heck, you go down the roster, there's probably a couple on the bench that they run things for too that he's really confident in doing so. To me, that was proof. Man, he trusts him, and Braylon Mullins has delivered in those crucial situations.
When you look at a player going from high school to college, you kind of never know, Nick, you know this, what the learning curve is going to be. And in particular, it's easy to look back at a player from a high school standpoint and say, well, now I get they played at smaller schools or against lesser college. I'm not saying this is the case with Mullins, but has AAU basketball and the year-long travel stuff reduced that learning curve? In other words, are players now going to college already kind of plug-and-play ready because they have seen so many different styles and levels of competition, not in high school, but rather in the summertime?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think they've played a ton of games, obviously. I think another thing that has helped is just when you look at how players develop, a lot of kids, they're just more skilled, I think, than they were back in the day. Like, look, when I was coming up, I'd just go to the Y and play ball, right? We'd play pickup and things. Like now you have more specialist guys doing more training type stuff, and they seem to come out and be much more skilled at a younger age. And then with the exposure on the different circuits and playing in these high-level competitions against other high-level players for so long, when you get a guy who has had that experience, it does seem like you can plug and play him a lot better. And then you add in the other stuff, right, that I kind of mentioned where if a guy who is really focused and you have his attention, he's played in those big games, you're going to be able to plug and play, and there's not going to be a bunch of distractions on the side. So I think that's absolutely true. It's changed how they develop both in the competition they played and how they've trained leading up to it.
How many different Butler teams have we seen this year? And grasp what I'm saying there, right? In terms of whether it be personnel or whether it be necessity of scheme, the different ways in which they have had to, or the number of different looks they have been able to put out.
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, you've got the plan at the start of the year, then Jalen Jackson goes down. And so then you kind of have to reset, and you've got Xavier sliding in there, and you kind of get in settled, and now he's out. So I would say this is certainly like kind of your third iteration of that. And in saying that, I mean that you have to really look at how do we play now? How are we going to attack? How are we going to guard? How are we going to do things differently with this personnel? And then if you look within that, Jake, that group has played differently at times. I mean, there've been games when the two halves look vastly different. And I think that's the challenge in, hey, if you're able to compete for 20 minutes, what can you do to maintain that level of competitive edge throughout the full 40, even if shots aren't falling, even if things aren't going your way? So certainly there's been 2 or 3 different versions. In those versions, Jake, are really hard because you're talking about a point guard position, the head of your team, where it's really hard to redefine and reassess when you're without that single position. So you've had to remake things while adjusting in probably the most important position on the court.
Okay, I want to know this. You said that when you were a younger player, it was just a matter of going to the Y and hooping for the day, right? I mean, the number of winter Saturdays spent at the Jordan YMCA, probably countless for both of us, right? I want to know the best two players that you used to have to play pickup ball with in the off season that you're like, man, people don't realize just how darn good that guy was, whether or not they played high school, college level or not.
Man, there were some unbelievable games over at that Jordan Y, Jake, as you know. Like, I remember when the season would end, everybody would just go over after school and run games. And, man, there are so many – because I remember being a freshman or a sophomore, right, and all the old guys are over there. So I remember, like, whenever James and Jason Gardner were on the same squad over there, that was going to be a tough one to beat, right? Yeah. Like, when you're talking about the North Central guys. There were so many. Remember Monte Crowder by chance, Jake?
I do know that name. Where did he play?
He played North Central. I can't remember where he went, but I just remember as a freshman, he was a junior or senior, and the dude was a beast. I mean, like 6'4", 6'5", could move, could do things, and he was a guy who I, for some reason, would end up matched up on sometimes, and that's a name that sticks out. Like, man, I used to hate having to guard that guy. That wasn't even fair.
Eddie, did you just tell me in my ear that you find Nick Gardner to be audibly sexy? Is that what you said?
No.
That makes me uncomfortable.
No. You remember the last time we had Nick on and we created our band? Because you said you're sounding audibly sexy.
Nick, did I say that? Did I say you're audibly sexy? Is that right?
Well, I think if I recall, I asked how you were doing. And you said, I don't usually say this often, but I'm feeling kind of sexy today.
Yeah, well,
it became audibly sexy, and then we had a band going. And I told you, I know the feeling, man.
Nick, let me tell you something here. And thank you for bringing that back up. I might not say it a lot that I feel sexy, but just about every day I do feel sexy. And I typically, when I walk out of the house, it takes me a little bit longer in the morning because I got to stop at the mirror 3 times and just admire it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is we should only, like, that's a given, so it should only be spoken if you're feeling unsexy. Then?
That's correct. The anomalies are the days when I'm not feeling this way.
Well,
right?
I brought this up, Nick, to Jake in his ear just to see if you've been practicing, because I know we've got a concert coming up soon. That's all I was wondering.
Well, we have, but we're not gonna, I've been practicing. We're going to have to make him come to the show, though, right? We're not going to give him any sneak peeks or anything.
You know what this is? It's
right.
The AST, the Audibly Sexy Trio. Although, Eddie, I'm not sure that you've worked your way into this just yet, right? I mean, Nick and I kind of got it down to an art here in terms of just the overall, and I can tell you, I mean, Nick, you go out and you order a pizza or something, and people immediately say, aren't you Nick Gardner? That of the Audibly Sexy Butler Radio Network. That's what you're like, yeah, okay. I don't know that Eddie is on the roster just yet, right?
Jake, I've had to quit going out because people have been bugging me so much about this.
Yeah, I know the feeling, yes. But for me, it's because most of them I owe them money. And if they recognize my voice, I'm in real trouble, right? All right, you can hear the Audibly Sexy Nick tonight at 7:30 over on our sister station Fuego. Pregame at 7 o'clock. It is Butler. It is Connecticut tonight. Nick, appreciate the time as always. I'll let you know when we have band practice.
I appreciate it as well, Jake. I'm ready whenever.
All right, appreciate it. Nick Gardner joining us on the program. Eddie, what do you think? No offense here. I just feel like you know what you need to start doing is smoking more. Just get a little bit more bass in the voice. Yeah. That helps.
No, thank you.
You know what I mean? You're either born with it or you become like Sam Elliott. You know what I mean? A lot of heaters.
What have you? Are you saying you've?
No, I was born with it.
Oh, okay.
My dad, it's genetic. My dad has a great voice.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
For what it's worth. Who has the most distinguished and recognized voice in America, do you believe? Not necessarily the way they speak, but just their voice in general. Who would you say?
I don't know.
Morgan Freeman? But Morgan Freeman's is largely the way he speaks, like his dialect, right? Same with McConaughey. McConaughey, it's the way he speaks. I mean, James Earl Jones would have been.
To say.
That would have been, but of course he's no longer with us, right? But someone of that ilk.
Eddie Murphy?
Again, I go back to that's more the way he speaks as opposed to just the tone of his voice. I mean, there are That's the challenge. Is it that the manner in which they're speaking or just the tone of their voice?
Arnold?
Sam Elliott is way up there.
Arnold?
Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
Again, that's accent, though, right? That's the way he speaks. But the pitch, if you will.
Jennifer Coolidge?
That's it. How'd you know?
I don't know.
Sam Elliott. With Sam Elliott, of course, now in Landman. But I still think when I think of Sam Elliott, I think of him in Mask. Hey, Rock, go and get me a beer. But again, that's the way he speaks. But he kind of mumbles his way through it. Right?
Bryan Cranston. Walter White.
Yeah.
And now they have him doing some Ford commercials.
I'll tell you the most famous voice, and I don't know. What about the guy that does movie previews? It's the same guy for every movie. Who is that?
We've got two people chiming in with the same name. Nick and James both say Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah, that's up there, but no longer with us, right?
Yeah, that's what they both acknowledged, yeah. Jim Nance? Hello, friends.
Jim Nance is a good one. That's a very good one. I mean, Joe Buck, for that matter, right? When you hear his voice, you automatically know. Not only do you know who it is, but you also feel like it's a big game.
Chris Collinsworth, here's a guy.
Last night, speaking of here's a guy, here's a moment for Purdue. Was it a boulder in the stream? We'll discuss next.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I love me some the man in the mirror. That's right. Now, Michael Jackson would be one if he was still living. When you hear him talk, you immediately know who it is based on his voice, not his diction. If he were just reading the alphabet, you would know it's him. This, by the way, I really did think, upon Michael Jackson's passing, I really did think this would become his posthumous signature song. But I think it's still, what would you say what is the signature song of Michael Jackson?
Thriller.
It's hard to argue that, but because of the fact that that's the eponymous, title for the album and the video. The video, I feel like everyone loves the video and the album of Thriller, but you never hear people singing along to the song Thriller. It's kind of weird.
Or Billie Jean.
I think Billie Jean might be it. Because just the opening, dun, 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 ooh, ooh, everyone immediately knows what it is. And you hear it still regularly. But I do think Man in the Mirror is a great song.
Yeah, Beat It, too.
Beat It's way up there. I mean, you could go off the wall stuff, but in bad, there's a ton, right? Last night for Purdue. Purdue this season is a little bit like the career of Michael Jackson. And the fact that Michael Jackson had, you had the Jackson 5 Michael Jackson, and then you had the off the wall, I'm now completely doing my own thing Michael Jackson, and then you had the creative dancing level Michael Jackson. And then later, he reinvented even again himself with some of just the theatrics of like Smooth Criminal, that sort of thing. There are different elements of his career of what performer he is. And Purdue this year, I think, has had different periods at the beginning of the year, they looked literally like an unstoppable force. Then they went through a period, and I think it was an acclimation of figuring out Kaufman-Wren and Clough and how that's going to work, and whether or not, Trey Kaufman-Wren, offensively speaking, is there a resentment there almost that some of his area was being taken up? And they lost themselves a little bit. But I thought last night was really big because you go in, and Nebraska's a really good team. And I know yesterday Andy Kendi had mentioned, and I understand it, that you don't feel like that's a big-time road environment and win because it's Nebraska. But that is a veteran team. That's a team that has older players that are, kind of unflappable. And Purdue came out and immediately set tone. And as I saw people say, like, this is an epic collapse by Purdue. Well, I mean, was it an epic collapse or was water fighting its level of two really good teams? When it came down to it, Purdue found a way. And that's what great teams do.
Now, what is the cameo in Rockwell? What's that for Purdue?
Boy, that's outstanding. The cameo in Rockwell, though, that like most people, let me think of, I'd have to look at their schedule. What was a period they had this year where they won simply because, was there a game Purdue won this year where Oregon, the Oregon game was their cameo in the Rockwells, somebody's watching me, because in the end, the whole time you're like, what? Who is this? And then you're like, you know what? It is still, you can't overcome that is definitely the voice of Michael Jackson. I know this is being billed as something else, but that is Michael Jackson's voice in the song. And that Oregon game, the whole time you're like, who is this?
Yeah.
But they found a way to win because you're like, and they held off Oregon because Oregon looked at it was like, we're still playing a top team in Purdue. But I just feel like last night, and we'll see what happens from here because the next test is going to tell us a lot. And I'm talking about Iowa and how they parlay what they did last night and finding a way to win late in that game. And that took some resolve, but you've got to build on that now by going into Iowa, which is not going to be tough, or not going to be easy. I mean, that's going to be a tough game. You know what we haven't done in a while, Eddie?
There's a lot of things we haven't done in a while, Jake.
Every once in a while we do a Transparency Thursday or a Transparency Tuesday. But I think we should do a Transparency Wednesday. And by that I mean open conversation of things, because we've got a lot of opinions out there that we need to let people get off their chest. I'll explain what I'm talking about on the other side.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You know the chorus of this song, right? There we go. I feel like sometimes, Eddie, and it's not by design. It's not by design. But, you know, JMV does his Anything Goes segments from time to time.
Yes.
And one of the things, and I totally understand it, and it's been, for me, an adjustment of when you do drive time radio, which I've done in both categories. I've done afternoons. I've done morning when people are in their car commuting to and from work. But when you do a midday show, it's a little bit different because a lot of the people that are listening are simply at work and have it on their computer or their radio in the background, whatever it may be. And you become programmed that not as many people are in their cars, so they're not participating. But I feel like we've had a number of different topics that would generate strong opinion. The trade the Pacers made, the Super Bowl, and whether or not a defensive matchup is of appeal or boring as heck. Because it really was a masterclass performance defensively, but it didn't lead to an overly exciting game, right? And so there are a number of things in which we probably, over the course of time, should have engaged more audience participation or conversation. And we do this every once in a while, Eddie, whether it be via text at 239-1070 or whether it be the phone lines at 239-1070, where we just open it up and it's like, you know what, if there was a question you had or a comment you wanted to make or an opinion about one of those topics that's out there for people to chime in. And I think, and I got to thinking about this too. I mentioned the other day, so right now, 239-1070, if you would like to join the conversation, you're more than welcome to do so, whatever it might be. You can even ask or chime in that you think Eddie should be part of the Audibly Sexy Trio, for example, instead of having to continue with his apprenticeship. But one of the things that I was talking about yesterday, and I think I overlooked, for example, when I have harped on, and maybe even to detriment, too actively harped on, this fascination I have about the fact that this Super Bowl, there wasn't like this big buildup locally. You didn't hear a lot of commercials about it or people talking about it or a generation of people like, yeah, I'm going to the Super Bowl party, or do you want to get in on my Super Bowl square, whatever it might be. And it dawned on me last night that a lot of that may be because such a large percentage of our community, from either a time standpoint, a money standpoint, or an emotion standpoint, put so much into the college football playoff for the first time that the Super Bowl was like, oh man, like I just got done with a 3-week vacation to Vegas, and now all of a sudden you want me to run down to the casino? I just got over it. You know what I mean? Like almost not a hangover effect, but just a, look, I've got to rechannel my energy and focus effect, if you will. 239-1070, the telephone number. Trent going to join us on the show, and I think he wants to talk about the mention of Rockwell and Michael Jackson. Hey, Trent, what's up?
Hey, Eddie. Hey, Jake. Yeah. Being that the Jacksons were on Motown, as we all knew, Rockwell is Berry Gordy's son.
Correct.
So they kind of grew up together, in case anybody didn't know. So he kind of just did his buddy, his old friend, a favor. So that's why he appeared on that record.
No, I knew that. The funny thing about it, though, is, and I remember at the time, Trent, let me ask you, how old a fella are you?
I am 60.
Okay, so we're basically of the same era here. So if you recall, you know, the Rockwell was kind of a cool-looking dude, right? Like, he's in the video, and he's getting, well, when I'm in the shower, I'm afraid to wash my hair. And he's sitting there, and he's playing the part, right? And
of course.
So And I thought the video, as a kid, I thought it was pretty cool. And I always felt bad for Rockwell, even though, to your point, Michael Jackson did him this solid. But eventually, and over the course of time, Michael Jackson's the one that kind of took over the song. Does that make sense?
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Of course.
I mean, you hear it, but that goes to, Trent, what I'm talking about, where when you hear Michael Jackson's voice, there is zero denying that it's Michael Jackson's voice. And it's not even the way that he delivers, it's the manner in which he does. Now, Trent, since I got you here real quick, we're going to do a little thing we do every once in a while called Get to Know Your Listener. We've had a lot of success on this. Kids love it in particular. Have you called the program before, Trent?
No, I have not. Listen every day, though.
Okay. Is your radio broken, or is that by intention?
No, I only really get the chance to listen when I'm in the car.
Okay. And so you said did you say you're 60, Trent?
Yes.
I'm going to guess that puts you somewhere around the high school graduating class of 82 or 83. Is that right?
84.
84, and that was from what school?
Actually, I didn't graduate from a school here. I graduated from a school in Los Angeles called Fairfax.
Fairfax, baby. I know Fairfax. It's Who did Sean Higgins go to Fairfax, I think?
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
He was
okay.
after me, but yes, he did.
Okay, so let me ask you this, Trent. How did you end up in Indianapolis from if you were born and raised in Los Angeles, how did you end up in Indianapolis, and what was her name?
Actually, the other way around. Born and raised in Indianapolis. Dad moved to Los Angeles, and I went out there for high school, and I ended up coming back here because it's much slower and much easier.
Yeah, that's probably true. But L.A., man, I'm telling you what. I don't know if you know this or not, Trent, but it's 72 and sunny 362 days a year in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. I know. Taking the trash out on Christmas Day in shorts. I remember that.
So, Trent, last question. I want to know what you like, but more importantly, what you don't like about this program, and I will not be offended. Eddie and I are always trying to improve, so I'd like to know the Trent critique.
What I like about the show is that you and Eddie are very knowledgeable. I think you got to let the QR thing go, man. I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
No, Trent.
Yes.
Trent, let me ask you something. Do you have kids?
Sorry. Hey, Eddie.
Thank you.
Eddie
Thank you.
Trent,
Thank you.
Sorry, Jake. Got to let it go.
How long have you known Eddie? Trent, do you have kids, by the way?
I have 4 kids, yes.
Well, I'm telling you what. Trent, you might think the QR thing's got to go, but your kids love it. I'm telling you right now, right?
My God.
I'm telling you right
Man.
now. It's just like Michael J. Fox said in Back to the Future. Might be a little loud for you, but your kids are going to love it. Trent, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for listening to the program.
Love the show, man. You guys take it easy.
See, QR. Trent loves the QR. He doesn't want to admit it. No, listen, but it was right there on the forefront of his mind, was it not?
No. Was not. Oh, that just made my day. Trent, you're my favorite listener now.
George Costanza, he's listed as, joins us. What's up, man?
Hey, Jake. Just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it. So
we're just working on the best lie. That's all, right?
Yeah. So anyway, you had mentioned George McGinnis earlier, and I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that. People may know and may not know, but in 1969, Indianapolis, Washington won the Indiana State High School Championship. George McGinnis, Steve Downing.
Yep.
Both of those guys go to IU in 1970. They go together. In 1971, Bob Knight comes to IU. George McGinnis leaves IU, and we always play the what if. If George McGinnis stays, the 73 team might have been the best team Indiana would have ever put on the floor. Now, I know the 75, 76 teams currently the greatest team, but if George stays with Bob Knight, that 73 team would have fielded George McGinnis, Steve Downing, and Scott May, a sophomore, on the front line. The backcourt would have been Steve Green and Quinn Buckner.
Well, and here's the other thing.
Think about that lineup.
And,
go ahead.
And in 73 in the Checker Dome, that means that Bill Walton fouls out and not Steve Downing, even though it should have been that way anyway, and Indiana beats UCLA, right?
Absolutely.
Now, I always
about that front line.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I've always been – I realize – so humor me here, okay, because my numbers get thrown off on this, okay? So were Downing and McGinnis the same class, or was Downing 1 year below? They were the same class, right?
Same class.
Okay.
69.
Okay, so the 71 season is, so 70 they were ineligible because freshmen couldn't play then, right? So 71, McGinnis averages 30, goes and becomes the first pick in the ABA draft, but Downing stays behind and Knight joins in 72, right?
I think it's like that. I thought Knight joined in 71, but go ahead.
What I'm saying is McGinnis had the 30-point season with Lou Watson. He did not play for Knight, right?
Correct.
Okay, so then, yeah, so 72 and 3. Okay, got it. But yes, there's no doubt. I mean, the two big what-ifs when it comes to Indiana basketball history, I mean, there are a number of them, but one would be what would happen if McGinnis stays. The other would have been, of course, what would happen if Bird stays, because then they join, Bird joins them in 74, and, of course, he ends up transferring. The whole story ends up at Indiana State. And can you imagine the 76 team? Bird would have been on that team as well. And the injury to Scotty May in 75 probably becomes obsolete as well. Rich. What's up, Rich?
I got cut off a while back when you mentioned Tim Kazurinsky. What was your reference there?
Tim Kazurinsky, who is the most underappreciated and underrated performer in Saturday Night Live history, in my opinion, used to do a bit where he actually played Gandhi, or I don't think it was supposed to be not Mahatmas Gandhi, but like a variation thereof. And he would ask questions to God. And one of his questions in 1982 is, what does God have against the Indiana Pacers?
I actually know Tim. I met him first in 1978.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Met him in 1978 at Second City. George Wendt was a friend of mine, and just saw Tim back in October at a memorial service for George up in Chicago.
Yeah, because George Wendt, if I'm not mistaken, is the uncle to Jason Sudeikis, correct?
Absolutely. I sat and talked to Jason's mom for quite a while back in October. But in 1978, my wife and I went up and saw before George went out to L.A. to end up being in Cheers later. And Kazurinsky did this bit. He had the New York Times in his back pocket, and he said, "This really chaps my ass." Anyway, my wife, 30 years later, meets him and says, "We saw you in 1978 at Second City," and he did his entire bit 30 years later.
I thought, Rich, I'm happy to know that he's still around and active. I thought he was brilliant. I thought Tim Kazurinsky was, like I said, to start it, I thought he was the most underrated and underappreciated aspect of SNL in those days. I thought he was brilliant.
He's the nicest guy, and he introduced me to Jim Belushi back in October and everything. Said, "This is the guy that reminded me of our bit that we did, blah, blah, blah."
So did you do Second City as well, Rich?
I knew it. Is that what you said?
No, did you do, were you at Second City?
No. Although my son did go up there for about a year on the Sundays for those, tryouts or not tryouts, but workshops. He did that for about a year. Yeah.
A ton of talent to come out of there. Rich, I appreciate it, man, very much so. And that's, you know what? Hey, listen, Rich, if you don't have my number, Rich, write this down at 317-523-9288. That's 317-523-9288. Because I'd love to get your number, because I would love to have Tim Kazurinsky on the program. It would be awesome to have him on and see if, in fact, he still wonders what God has against the Indiana Pacers. Would be the best thing ever. So I would love it. So, Rich, if you can send me a message, if that's possible. I don't know if it is or not. But if it's possible, it would be awesome. Speaking of Second City, by the way, in Chicago, epic and world-famous comedy house. Tons of talent like that running through New York City. And last night in the Garden, Eddie, were you surprised that the Pacers were able to pull that off last night, or what was your expectation or anticipation going in?
I was surprised they were able to pull it off. New York has been surging lately. They've been one of the hottest teams in the NBA. They are the best team in the Eastern Conference when they play in their home arena. Last night, they don't have OG Anunoby or Mitchell Robinson, but they still have Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Karl Anthony Towns, and Mikal Bridges. So it's a formidable four right there. And Landry Shamet's a solid role player for them this season. And The Pacers go in there, and it was a heck of a game. 39 lead changes, the most in a game this season in the NBA, and it's one of the most. I think it's like top 3 since the play-by-play era, which is 1990 or 1966, 1967, when they could start tracking those sort of statistics. And neither team had a double-digit lead in the game, I think, until overtime for the Pacers. Quentin Jackson just came up with play after play after play, especially in overtime, but throughout the course of the game as well. Andrew Nembhard had another really, really solid performance, 24 points, 10 assists. He has just continued to evolve this season and develop Jake into a point guard. And it is interesting to me on how this team will look next season when you have Tyrese Halliburton and Andrew Nembhard out there,
Right.
because I think the development this year of Nembhard could even unlock another level of this Pacers offense when Tyrese comes back, because remember when they traded Buddy Hield, whenever that was 2 seasons ago, and they were struggling on the 3-pointers as a team collectively. So they turned Tyrese into like the Buddy Hield off the ball shooter. Well, now you can do that a little bit more to kind of wean him back into, the return to play, as Ralph Reef and other medical professionals will put it, by having Andrew Nembhard operate as the team's point guard. Now, so it's very interesting.
Nembhard, the thing that is curious to me about both Nembhard and Halliburton, what would you say is the natural position of Andrew Nembhard?
Point guard.
And what would you say is the natural position of Tyrese Halliburton?
Point guard.
I know. And yet, and I don't know if this would be a good question for Rick Carlisle when both are out there. Is it set to set, dependent upon which one is which role? Is it game to game? Is it quarter by quarter? How do they divvy it up? Or is it just, how do they know? And it's part of the brilliance of that offense, of when you bring it up, which one is the one that is actually kind of operating the offense in that moment?
It's almost positionless for them.
It is.
Just because, A, with how much to move the basketball, and B, how those two can play well next to each other.
But part of that also changes with now, if you go positionless, if you look at a year ago, Eddie, and when the Pacers were in the finals, and the rotations you most consistently had, Halliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, those 3 in particular. Then you throw in Toppin.
We do have an injury report for tonight's game against the Nets on the Segababa.
Okay, hang on just a second. You throw in Toppin, you throw in Turner a year ago. All of them, and even Siakam for that matter, they all can play at minimum 2 and oftentimes 3 different positions. So they were very positionless.
Yeah.
In the way that they ran a year ago. You bring in Zubats now, that changes a little bit because you have a very definitive 5.
Yeah.
And so does that mean that they have to then the fluid nature of everybody being able to just play different, being like positionally androgynous, if you will. Does that now change when you have Zubats there? Do you need to have a definitive point and off guard, and Nembhard and Halliburton have to kind of figure that out from set to set? As for tonight, Eddie, tell me this. We're going to do this in trivia form.
Okay.
Are there any players that are listed as out tonight? Don't tell me the players, just tell me the number.
The number of players listed as out?
Yes.
Okay.
Not including Tyrese Halliburton and Obi Toppin.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6 players listed out tonight.
Not including Obi Toppin and Tyrese Halliburton, yes.
Johnny Furphy.
Bingo.
Aaron Nesmith.
Yes. Aaron Nesmith out with lower back soreness.
Okay. Ivica Zubats.
Yes. Out with a left ankle sprain.
Okay.
Which I find interesting because they waited until the active list had to be submitted last night to list him as out, and today he's listed straight up as out, even though Rick Carlisle said he's not playing until after the All-Star break at the earliest.
I'm going to go with T.J. McConnell.
You are correct. Right hamstring soreness.
Okay, and that's I hate when that happens. I have one more.
You got two more.
Oh, two more. Yeah, you're right. Andrew Nimhard.
Yes, out with lower back injury management.
Mm-hmm. Now, the big one here. I'll go with Pascal Siakam.
You are correct. Out with left hamstring soreness.
Really? Which hamstring is sore for McConnell?
Right hamstring soreness.
Well, it's too bad one can't loan the other, right? Go back and forth.
Well, yeah, too bad, Jake.
See, I'm telling you, you're going to start seeing more of this, obviously.
And you got two players listed as questionable. Micah Potter, left ankle sprain, and Jarris Walker with an illness. Now, Jarris missed his first game of the season last night against New York with that illness. He didn't even make it to the arena last night, from my understanding. So he was, in fact, ill. And it's also key to remember you have to have 8 players active for a game when it starts. So now you're looking at Ben Shepherd.
Okay, hold on. We'll do it. Okay, Ben Shepherd.
Yep. Talon Peter.
Quentin Jackson.
Quentin Jackson, yes.
Micah Potter, right?
Micah Potter, yes. Jay Huff.
Okay.
Ethan Thompson.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, hold on. Who are we missing here?
That would be Cam Jones.
Oh, yep. I should have known that. Yep. Okay.
And Kobe Brown.
Forgot about Kobe. Okay.
There's your 8.
So this is post-brawl team, right?
Kind of, yeah. That's 8 if Walker does not suit up tonight.
Where's Britton Johnson when we need him? Tremaine Folks.
Right.
That's if who doesn't suit up?
Jarris Walker.
Oh, I forgot about Walker. Okay.
Yeah.
Could be a big night for Jarris Walker, right?
Maybe. It'd be interesting to see how many minutes he gets coming off the illness, though, depending on how ill he was.
So tonight, Ben Shepherd,
or is
Talon Peter, Quentin Jackson, Micah Potter, Jay Huff, Ethan Thompson, Kobe Brown, Cam Jones, and potentially Jarris Walker taking on the Brooklyn Nets. What's the Nets record, Eddie?
Brooklyn is 15-37.
Pacers are at 14 or 15 right now.
14 and 40.
You got to keep a safe distance there, right?
For Brooklyn, they tonight will not have Michael Porter Jr.
Okay.
He is listed as out. Nick Claxton was downgraded today with a hip injury to doubtful. And then Noah Clowney, who is a 21-year-old who's averaging 13 points a game, he's listed as probable with an ankle injury.
Checking my text messages, by the way. Hey, Jake, you're not real smart, are you, boy? But your is spelled Y-O-U-R. How's it feel to meet your match? Okay. Okay, fair enough. I'm not sure what that means, but there you go. But don't you think if you're saying you're not that smart, you should at least spell the contraction of you are correctly? Doesn't that seem fair, Eddie? Eddie is transfixed right now at looking at injury reports.
Oh, yeah.
You look mesmerized by who is in or out for the Nets.
No, I just gave you the Nets injury report. That's it. I was looking at a text we got on the text line.
So the Nets have, what, 4 out?
They have 3 on the injury report, 1 out, 1 doubtful, 1 probable.
We'll get more into it and what happened last night in Lincoln next.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Been an eventful day here. Talked to Zach Keefer earlier in Italy. That was cool because he was on that bus. Now, when he says he's on a bus, and then it's just he and the bus driver. In that situation, would you be seated at the back of the bus or would you sit up front?
I'm just impressed and proud of you, Jake, for not saying, hey, Zach, can you go up to the bus driver and hand him your phone so I can talk to him?
Well, that's what I wanted to do. But he said the bus driver was concentrating on Zach seemed standoffish with that thought, right? Didn't he say that they were going around? It was like Whoville. They were going around some road at the top of a mountain with a bunch of the village was down below.
Like the Polar Express movie?
He was a little worried. Whoville?
I know. I was saying, have you seen Polar Express when they're going up the mountain?
Yes. Same thing, right? Like
yeah.
Yeah. But that was cool, though, and the other thing that was remarkable, now this to me befuddles me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
How is it possible that the clearest reception we've gotten from our lung dart toting chipmunks that run our phone lines was a call from the Italian Alps on a bus? Did you notice that?
Well, I thought Brian Neubert's call from the Nebraska airport was pretty solid.
So he was in Lincoln?
Yeah.
Last night, Brian Neubert was there because of Purdue and Nebraska in Lincoln. And I thought it was, and we shall see what it means moving forward for Purdue. It felt like it could be one of those wins that they get that you could look back on and say, and this always happens, when a team makes a deep run, when a team gels together at the right time, when a team wins a championship or goes to a Final Four, then you look back and as the confetti's falling and they're getting ready to interview the coach, you know, they always say, Coach, you take a look at the season and you look back on such and such the struggles you had when you were being overlooked and written off. An open disclaimer, I absolutely 100% believed at the beginning of the year that Purdue was the best team in college basketball. And I think if you look at what they did, you know, before the turn of the year and the schedule they were playing and the challenges they were meeting, it's hard to disagree with the fact that at that time they were the best team in college basketball. But as often happens, you know, teams hit a rut. And I caught a lot of grief at the beginning of the year when I said that I thought that Braden Smith was the best player in college basketball. And is the best player, for example, at this point, Peterson at Kansas, who Nate makes the very good point of, if you think that Nembhard and Halliburton are both natural points, do you draft a Peterson and put him at the 2 and then rotate through Nembhard and Halliburton at the point? Maybe, if you have that pick. But, and, you know, Boozer, there are a number of players, Wilson, DeBanza, a number of players you could say are the best player in college basketball. But Braden Smith, coming into the year, the one that was running an engine as well as anybody. And the engine started to sputter, for sure. And part of that was their defensive effort or lack thereof. Part of it perhaps was, as Brian Neubert was saying, Trey Kaufman-Renn just like, you know what? So I'm not going to be your main scoring guy. I'll find other areas. Part of it may have just been their being forced to learn to play different positions. Or not different positions, different roles. Even though they are very familiar with one another. And then Fletcher Lawyer going into a shooting slump and overcoming that. But I thought what we saw last night from Purdue that was encouraging was twofold. Number one, Purdue's ability, yes, they got out to a huge lead. They were very much in control of the game. And then Nebraska, give Nebraska credit, Nebraska finds its way back. And trust me, I'm not the only one, I'm sure, on this that looked at it and said, this would be a disastrous loss for Purdue because of how in control of this game they were. And if they were to allow Nebraska to come roaring back.
They were up 14 with like 2:40 left.
Correct. I mean, a borderline epic collapse, right? And then you go in the overtime and you're thinking, if they lose this, then that might be a dam breaker. That's without the N, like the water coming through the dam. And they may never come back from that for this year. That might be what does them in. And I was thinking to myself, however, if they're able to stave this run from Nebraska and they go into overtime and then salvage a win out of it, it's the way that they won. It's the way that they won in getting contribution above and beyond your core. Purdue is 22-0 in games when Fletcher Lawyer hits at least 4 3-pointers. So you know what you're getting there. You know, Oscar Clough and Kaufman Wren and learning to play alongside one another, and then Braden Smith. You know what you have with your core. But when you're getting not one but two key 3-point baskets from C.J. Cox down the stretch, when you are getting, you know, Jack Bender coming in and getting key rebounds for you, and you know that Harris is a guy that is going to make free throws for you late down the stretch. He's an over 85% free throw shooter, if I'm not mistaken. But those complementary pieces, that's what separates very good teams from great teams. Great teams find ways to win games when they need to call upon above and beyond what's on the surface for them, or more importantly, where they have off nights and they still find a way to win. And that's what you saw last night. Now, Iowa is tricky because Iowa's a team that we thought was going to just play. If you looked at Ben McCollum and what he did at his previous stop, it was all about grinding down and slowing teams down. And, you know, when Indiana was going through their coaching search and Ben McCollum's name was out there and people were like, oh, gosh, no, anybody but him because look how boring they play. I'm not going to want to go and watch, you know, essentially what you're seeing, you know, Mick Cronin style of play. And yet Iowa's playing with a little tempo now. And at times looks really, really good. That's not an easy game for Purdue. But if you can pick that one up as well, and then you look at it and say, okay, we had to go away from home, 2 tough environments, and it is weird to think still that Nebraska is a tough environment, but it is. Purdue, when they were in their skid, when they weren't playing well, defense was a big culprit there, but that is still something that you can put behind you, and if you are winning, then you can look back and say, boy, coach, you had that stretch. We left you for dead, we thought, and then what happened in Nebraska? And you parlayed that into a win at Iowa, and I think Purdue might have been rattled a little. Rattled's the wrong word because they're a veteran team, but there's just a swagger that comes with being, you know, like on a streak. There's a swagger that comes with it. And they might have lost a little of that. And last night, the way in which they won against Nebraska, that may be what they needed just to kind of get their mojo back. Eddie, basically to get back their audible sexiness, right?
What?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for listening.
I thought that was just you, me, and Nick Garner. You were the front man, he was the bass player, and I'm the drums. I'm the drummer.
You're the drummer.
Yes.
So you're Peter Criss.
Why would I be Peter Criss?
He was the drummer for Kiss.
Okay.
You know, they often say the last thing a drummer says in a band is, hey, guys, how about playing some of my stuff? But little known fact, not little known, but Peter Criss's song that he wrote for Kiss is Beth, which I believe is the highest charting song in Kiss's history. Gene Simmons, I think, has always had issue with that. Which member of Kiss would you want to be? Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, whichever way you want to pronounce it, Peter Criss, or Paul Stanley?
Paul Stanley.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fair. Is that because you like to be a guy with 2 first names? Although
yes.
I guess Peter Criss would be the same.
Yeah.
You know? Fair enough. I would be Gene Simmons for the obvious reason.
Oh, come on.
Excuse me?
I say, come on. Yeah, that was obvious. The guy that gets all the attention.
Except for that, I don't want to spit blood, and he terrified me when I was a kid. Ace Frehley's no longer with us, so I don't want to be that. How about Peter Criss? I'll be the guy that just kind of in the wings comes up with the stuff that turns out to be the best hit. I see Greg Rakestraw walking around. I think that means he's in for J&B today. Is J&B off today?
Yeah, J&B is off today. I think he had to help his mom down in southern Indiana or something.
Okay. So Rake is here. We'll see what he's got cooking as part of our crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com.
No. CJ, it's not what Rake is cooking. It's what Rake is raking in.
We know what he's raking in. You kidding me? With the number of gigs he's got all over the place. But we'll find out what he does have going in terms of the crossover brought to you by Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141. Hey there, Jake Query for Surfside. Look for the can with the sunset stripes. And this time of year when the weather is all over the place, you might have a different taste every day, no problem, because of the wide variety of flavors from Surfside. I'm talking about iced tea or lemonade with a splash of vodka. How about the blueberry lemonade or the half and halves that feature, of course, you've got blackberry tea, you've got raspberry tea, you've got mango tea, a wide variety of flavors. Surfside, just 100 calories, 2 grams of sugar, and no bubbles, so oh so smooth with no carbonation. Wherever you buy your favorite adult beverage, please be 21 and consume responsibly.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
People are getting angry at me, Eddie, because we're not playing the correct Michael Jackson signature songs. This is way up there, though, right?
Yeah. Why are people getting mad about Billie Jean? It's one of his best hits.
Smooth Criminal's pretty good, isn't it?
Yes.
How about Dirty Diana?
Not familiar with Dirty Diana.
Cue up a little Dirty Diana. You'll know Dirty Diana.
I've never seen her.
Yeah. But I'm just telling you. And, you might like to meet her. You'll know Dirty Diana. That's off of Dangerous, like kind of last hurrah Michael Jackson. I think I've told the story before, probably only 50 times, but when Michael Jackson had to come to Indianapolis for a deposition, there was a lawsuit about whether or not someone, I can't remember if he was suing somebody for stealing like musical riff or somebody else sued him or whatever it might be, but he had to come to Indianapolis to give a deposition. This would have been around 2003 or 4, and I was working at Channel 6. My buddy Larry, who was at the time an intern at Channel 6, I was like, hey, you want to go down to Circle Center and get something to eat in between shows? So we just walked down to Circle Center, and we're going down to go to the food court, and there's this mass of people. I'm like, what in the world? And all of a sudden, inside, I believe it was called Sam Goody, was the music store inside Circle Center. And the barriers lifted up, and I'm like, why is Sam Goody closed? And these people went crazy, and 2 security guards, and then Michael Jackson walking in between them came walking out. And literally, I mean, he was past by the time I even like grasped everything that had just happened, but he walked right past us. I mean, literally like right past us. And the thing that I remember was frankly, as bizarre looking as he became in his later years with all of the surgeries and everything, seeing him in person, he looked much more normal than he did on television. And you could see like the facial structure of Michael Jackson. It was like, oh my gosh. Went right past. That was my MJ brush with greatness. Did you find Dirty Diana, Eddie? Do or don't know it?
I don't think so.
Okay, right hold. Okay, right here.
Nope.
Don't know it? That's got a huge guitar solo in the middle of it. I think it's Slash that does it.
I know Eddie Van Halen's the one who does it in Just Beat It.
Correct. I did know that. If you ever look, by the way, at Beat It, if I'm not mistaken, the pool tables where they're doing their Rumble in L.A., there are no holes in the billiard table. Apparently, they got a discount on those just for the sake of the props. Greg Regstraw has arrived. He is in for J&V today. Crossover brought to you by Love Heating, love-hvac.com. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number. Over 100 years in central Indiana. Not Greg Regstraw, but Love Heating and Air.
Close.
That's right. Rake, what's on the big program today?
Well, let's see. Zach Osterman will be on the show today. Kevin Bowen will be on the show today. Your counterpart with the IndyCar Radio Network, as he's making the move to PRN full-time, Nick Yeoman will be on the program today. Josh Mullins, who is now probably better known as Braylon Mullins' dad, since UConn is playing at Butler this evening. And the morning show had Miami of Ohio head coach Travis Steele on. I'll have their top player in Pete Suter on the show, native of Carmel, as the Redhawks remain unbeaten. They play on ESPN at 9 o'clock on Friday night. And Miami is always a school because of its proximity to Indiana. Has a lot of Indiana ties, like almost the entire coaching staff are Indiana natives, and 2 of their best players, and Pete Suter and Justin Kirby, are Hamilton County kids. So we'll talk about the Redhawks.
I'm surprised by this, Greg. You tell me if this surprises you. The bracketology stuff, and typically I kind of roll my eyes at those things, as you know, but the bracketology is usually pretty dead on. I mean, they're pretty close. They've got Miami still as an 11 seed.
Correct. And the reason being is that whether nobody would play them or they didn't go out and try to find guarantee games, their strength of schedule was not great. And again, the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah, how was the league? I'm going to a MAC game tonight.
Probably of the 31 or 32 leagues, probably without even looking, probably 14th or 15th would be my guess. And so the strength of schedule does not love them a great deal, and that's the reason why.
Well, MAC will be this year a how many bid league?
There is a chance that if Miami keeps winning and say Miami is unbeaten going into the league tournament and they were to get knocked off, I think they would have a chance to get in.
Are they the only at-large?
Yes, correct. That would be the only one. Yeah, it's a one-bid league. I mean, frankly, you're probably down to.
It hasn't always been, though. You know what I mean?
Right. You're down to, but that's the widening gap between the power conference teams and the non-power conference teams. The term mid-major is almost extinct in college basketball at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm going tonight to see Ball State and Buffalo.
Nice.
At Worthen. And it's been a couple of years since I've been to Worthen Arena. Do you have parking suggestions?
Last time I was there for an event, the parking was free.
Really?
And there was plenty of open spaces. Now, because school would be in session, maybe that's not the case, but I would imagine, given the crowds or lack thereof they've had in Muncie as of late, parking should not be a problem.
I'm going to Indiana State a week from tonight, and I think that's probably going to be a similar situation in terms of
their crowds have been slightly better. I was there. I did the Illinois State game on ESPN Plus, and depending on what the television alignment is, I have their regular season finale against UIC on March 1st. And there you are so in downtown Terre Haute, but parking is all. Now, are you going
garage right
just
as
a casual fan, or are you going like media credentials?
No, it's fan.
Okay.
I just bought 2 tickets, and my buddy David Crumley's an ISU grad, and I said, let's go and watch them play. And
are you going to the Ballyhoo before the game?
They're playing Northern Illinois. You know what? David's got to work in Terre Haute that day, so I'll probably get there, to be honest with you, like 6:30.
Okay. Well, the lot just north, I think, north of the entrance to the building is a media lot. So you could probably claim, "Hi, I'm Jake Query from the IndyCar Radio Network."
I've always believed
93.5 and 107.5 The
if
Fan.
I'm not there on a working purpose,
okay,
then I ain't gonna take advantage of it. I mean, I get it, but I'll go and like I said, I bought 2 tickets. We're gonna go and enjoy it, and I did the same for we've done IU Indy. We're gonna do. Evansville would be the last one. Evansville's really struggling, by the way.
Correct. Yeah.
Just to go around the area and see some of the D1 teams. But Rake is up next. The first guest that you will have will be which one?
Zach Osterman at 3:30.
Zach Osterman at 3:30. Greg Rakestraw will help bring you home. Eddie, what do we have lined up for tomorrow on the big program?
We'll have Tony East tomorrow to kind of recap the quote-unquote first half of the season for the Pacers as they head into the All-Star break, and who knows what else, Jake.
All right, so we will get to that tomorrow. I thank everybody today for listening to Corey. Even those of you that said that I'm just not that smart, it is greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening to Query and Company.